Okay, folks, I wasn't really planning on making a part three to this stuff, but I was kind of cut off there a little bit. The video was going a little bit long. Um, well, to try to sum this all up, it's not an easy thing to sum up because with the arts and humanities and media and talking about movies and music, even video games as well, of course. Plus, there's actually like the theater, which I haven't really talked about too much, which you generally don't think of in super dark terms necessarily. But I mentioned Les Miserables at least. And art. I mentioned Salvador Dali at least. And with all this stuff, and when we're exploring very dark subjects, um, there's there's not only the question of is this something that's going to be a detriment to my own character, right? Watching this stuff, is this a bad thing to watch? There's a whole lot of train of thought. There's also the train of thought of, again, what's the morality? What are these people that are involved making this? What's their morality? And is that going to be healthy for me? And then there's also, I don't know. Then there's like the questions of, so there's all this these other sides to dark stuff, which is one of the reasons why we make this stuff in the first place. We can say the Friedkin wanted to warn people about the reality of evil, but let's be honest here. There's a lot of reasons why we like scary stuff. If we do, some people absolutely can't stand it. But the reason why a lot of us are curious about scarier stuff, or darker stuff, or mysterious stuff, or anything with the slightest bit of shadow, is, hey, we are trying to gain knowledge. We are trying to gain wisdom. We're trying to, on some level get braver, more aware of things in life. We're trying not to be little kids the rest of our lives, basically. We have things to explore. We have things to think about. We have things to do. And some of that involves becoming more aware of things that are more frightening, whether or not that happens in real life or just in music or fiction, movies, whatever it is. We want to. We are going to have those times in our lives when we have those stages of growth or increasing in understanding on some level that actually we do need to have to be, I would say, adults that, adults. To, of course, a 20-year-old won't see things the same way as a 40 or 60 or 80-year-old. You have these different, but then, of course, age is all relative. Some people mature faster at times than others, all that jazz. But it's just, we want to not be children in our comprehension of things. And it takes time to learn and experience life and grow to the point where, like, oh yeah, anyway. But some of that learning and growing and experiencing does involve, whether again it's real life or fiction, contact with these darker things. And so we're naturally curious about a lot of stuff. We're curious about things we don't know. We're curious about why we're afraid of certain things. And we also love the thrill of being scared, but only to a certain extent. Like, Friedkin was like, that's why he didn't want people to being traumatized is a negative thing. Nobody actually wants to be traumatized. We want to be scared, but there's a limit, in that whole arena, to what we can handle, to what we can be able to process and just function. If we, experience in real life, or it's often real life, but if something is so traumatic or potentially so traumatic to more sensitive souls, in a movie, then that's not a good thing, right? That's definitely Look, I knew a little girl. Well, I taught her piano lessons. She wasn't so little. She was like, but she was a kid still. She's like, maybe 10, 11, or in that ballpark. Her mom, the family's so nice, the greatest family in the world. I love them. The family. And one of my older, I haven't. This is one of my previous students I taught piano lessons to, and her siblings, brother and sister and stuff, and also dad. But she was so scared by the movie The Witches. Witches, it was just the fact that those witches had purple eyes in the Jim Henson production, and her mom didn't think it would be a big deal, but I guess it was to her, and she was not happy with how scary that scene was. And yeah, that actually makes sense to me. But so she worked out with her mom, and they were friends again. But and everybody's different. Every kid's different. You never know. But about these things. But what we're ultimately after, for some of us, there's a side to some of this dark stuff. For some of this dark stuff, what we're ultimately after is a good scare. That's mainly what we want. We just wanted a good scare, like being in a roller coaster. Beyond that point, there is a side to all that dark stuff where we say, I honestly want to know. I want to explore the subject more. I want to understand it better. I don't want to be afraid of it, or I want to whatever it is. However you're viewing it, we're trying to grow as human beings, and this is one means to do that. There are many other means to do that. Certainly, we need to balance our recreational time with work time and all those other things in life, and other things we need to be on and doing life, that sort of thing. But, but like with this subject in particular, are you going to? Vast majority of us, you can see all the supernatural stuff as hocus pocus. First off, right? And so that kind of person would not be interested in. Maybe the good scares is great, but it wouldn't treat a lot of these things very seriously. And when it comes to things like demons, that's another thing too. Is there's a lot of very religious folks that, and this is the very topic was explored in The Exorcism of Emily Rose, because you have these very logical or these people that believe in God, right? They believe in God, but yet it's inferred that because they're having a hard time believing in like demon possessions and things, there's kind of suggestion that they maybe don't believe in the devil, but they just believe in God. But so there's a lot of different trains of thought here. There's a lot of different emotions. People don't want to think about the dark side. They want to think about the good side, because that's usually the case for a lot of people that are Christian or Mormon or whatever. It doesn't matter. Other faiths, for that matter, Buddhists. You talk to anybody in the world, most people would rather think about positive things than negative things, of course. But even that being the case, there's always that side to everyone that's just in the back of our mind saying, but do you really know about this subject or that subject? You really? And sometimes we just push those things away, get to a point maybe where we say, you know what, I'm ready to tackle the subject. So you're ready to explore a subject. But how do you know, first off, if a subject, how do you know if something is actually going to be beneficial to you? And let me bring up this one point here. I'm just going to mention 3 broad areas of sinful behavior, in my opinion. 3 broad areas. One is sexual immorality. The other one is witchcraft. The other one is basically torture, murder. But you torture someone at length before you murder them. So these 3 things are pretty seriously bad. But one of them is considered more hocus pocus. The other 2 are more real for a lot of people's minds. But it's like, should you research any of those subjects? Are all 3 of them dark enough that maybe you ought not to get too far into any of those subjects? And I would say, yeah. I mean, like, unless there's something that you absolutely must do or figure out or know about something that is just more pertinent to your life and just living a good life, Unless there's something that's very much in your grill, in your face, you gotta, you know, if it's just something, it's different than some curiosity that you have. Now it's fine to be curious. That's how we learn and grow. So many of us get more intelligent. It's our curiosity. But because of the darkness of those three subjects, I'm also referring especially to witchcraft. It's all three of them really, because they are dark and because they're sinful if you do things the wrong way. I mean, look, sex is great, but if you misuse it, again. But that's a different deal. But the thing is that so the witchcraft. Well, so it's hocus pocus, right? But so you're trying to someone's trying to research it. Maybe one, because they're trying to figure out if it's real or not. Two, they're trying to figure out just what it is, and three, I don't know. You can just keep going. There's all kinds of reasons, I guess, but it's one of those subjects where I know just from the very limited amount I've seen online, from looking at what a real magic spell is. I saw what it was involved in producing some kind of effect. Oh man, it scared me to death. It scared me to death. Actually, picturing doing something like that, it was unthinkably frightening, beyond traumatic, in a way. You would say, "Oh no, it's not that scary." Well, the thing oh man, no, I just I didn't want to go there, and if you guys want me to tell you what that is, I can in general terms. I'm not going to get into specifics. What witchcraft actually is, but yeah, but yeah, I learned at least what it was, and I learned enough to know that I didn't want anything to do with it at all, ever, 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 ever. Christopher Lee, the actor Christopher Lee himself, has said, if you get into witchcraft, you can lose your soul. I mean, look, is this the sort of guy that you would not treat? Not treat? No, you take him at his face value. You take Christopher Lee seriously. He was being serious, and when Saruman is being, you know what I'm saying? Christopher Lee is an awesome guy. I don't even think I can't do justice to how awesome he is, but just take him at his word. It's dark stuff, and the reason I mention all this again is because this plays into what we're talking about here, with regard to watching, doing scary stuff. Scary movies, scary music, composing scary music. When I'm composing scary music, by the way, music is one of the arts that's a little bit more. It's so emotional, right? It's so connected with emotion, the harmony of it all. But it's not as specific as a movie. A movie, you get very specific visual images. Music accompanies that. Music suggests things. But music on its own, and music is less specific than art. Both art and, most of the different kinds of arts are more concrete. Even the very abstract cubists and things in art, you're still looking at something. You can actually see it. When you listen to something, it suggests things. It never spells things out entirely. You have to have lyrics for that sort of, that sort of stuff. I can't tell you how many pieces I've written where I'm like, what am I going to name this? What's the title going to be? And the reason why that's such an issue is because, and we had a discussion about this one time in my avant-garde composition classes in college. And the reason why it's such a topic of discussion is because music is less concrete that way. There is no. There's a visual musical connection you can make that I have always made, and that's the way my brain works. But music is very connected with its sound, basically, but it connects with our spirit, but in a very different way than the other arts. And so when you're talking about scary stuff, you're talking about how do you play with dissonance, how do you play with all these kinds of harmonies for these different emotional effects, different pitch bends, different timbres and things. How do you just there's a whole train of thought there, and you're talking about energy, increasing or decreasing it, and why at different points. Subito pianos, and get into all the definitions of subito. Suddenly soft, suddenly loud. Usually it's suddenly loud that startles you. But if you start having too many startling moments in a movie, it starts to be comical or starts to be boring. So, there's that. That's it's in movie making right there. In addition to, the musical side of what we're doing. Or what the whole process of making something frightening. But, there's so many different sides to the subject. I feel like even covering this in three videos, I can't do this justice. But I can tell you, again, there's a spectrum of media, darkest to kid-friendly, or just fine, or even edifying, uplifting, inspiring, in some cases. Yeah, but you're talking about something scary that doesn't really apply so much, in a way. But there's a lot of, you can get into the whole religious thing. There's a lot of scary movies that have to do with Catholicism, by the way. Why is that? I don't know. I have my own trains of thought there. I've mentioned stuff about the Catholic being, I don't know. It has a lot to do with the statues and the images that you're in a church, and it can be so deathly quiet, and the way that the churches are just kind of just are. If you're in a church in the middle of the night, and these you see these images are looking right at you. I mean, come on now, that's extremely frightening. Who wouldn't be frightened? If Jesus is looking at you, you would think that Jesus would be reassuring, would be calming. He is, but there's that side to statues, at least. If talking about Jesus himself you'd be just fine. But anything other than actual personage of Jesus, or God, or something, you're talking about just a statue. A statue is just a statue, and you would hope that the church is blessed, that it's a safe place. You would hope that would be the case, but these scary movies sometimes suggest otherwise, or they suggest that the unseen world is a lot more mysterious than we might think. So when we see Jesus' eyes move, oh man, something happens to him. He starts crying. Oh my gosh, man! That's like, well, there goes that idea of being safe in a church, or that whole train of thought. And that's just really deeply, the directors, William Friedkin knew exactly what he was doing, and it's not going too far, but if you, and whether it doesn't matter if you're Catholic or LDS, other Christian, if you associate the image of Christ with, you're a what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I think you guys know what I'm trying to say. And I suppose on some level this is very Catholic, maybe more like somewhat of a Catholic train of thought. But you take like an image of Christ, and you do this stuff, to eyes moving, and heaven forbid, and of course this is a Stephen King thing, making in his book, actually in his original you had images of Christ and other holy figures that are making faces. They're like mocking faces, like leers and stuff. And he included that in his, I think, just to up the evil of Pennywise. Maybe I'm spoiling stuff. I shouldn't tell you too much about this stuff. But yeah, again, there's always the question: is it called for? And when is it called for? There's a moral side to what you're asking, and there's kind of an emotional side, the emotional, intellectual, curiosity thing, the whole emotional, intellectual, curiosity, provoking, answering your questions, all that stuff. Aside from the strictly moral, spiritual, this is the reason why we enjoy some scary stuff, to a point. There is a point that we shouldn't go past, and that you might think that's different for different people or whatever. Well, it's hard to know where that point is. The main thing is, I think, yeah. So these kinds of movies are very satisfying. They can be very beefy, or they can be very shallow and dumb. When you've seen a very shallow and dumb movie, because you don't feel any more intelligent after seeing it. You feel dumbed down, like a creature feature that's really poorly done. And I do mean, I'm not just talking about the blob. The blob is even better than that stuff. Because the blob is this idea of some life form that's trying to just swallow up everything in its path. And it's like a nightmare. It's basic. It's like a, I don't know, you can talk about zombies and how they're more basic idea, but if you can't get away from them, they just keep coming. And you have to sleep at some point. They can eat you while you're asleep. Is the blob going to consume you when you're asleep? It's also like the movie, the Night of the Living Dead was Zombies, George Romero. There's the Invasion of the Body Snatchers. There's the idea of if you were, that was with Leonard Nimoy and Donald Sutherland and who's it? Some other guys. But in that movie, there's always the question of who was. That was the question: was who was invaded by the alien life form? The aliens are trying to be like everyone else, but there was this little things about him that were a little different, right? Oh, Jeff Goldblum. That's right. So Jeff Goldblum, Leonard Nimoy, and Donald Sutherland were the main three actors. I remember. There's some other girls, but those are the main three. But yeah, it's frightening, but it's uneasy. It's like that's what they want you to feel. They want you to feel uneasy. They want you to feel like you can't. It's hard to know who to trust. That's the whole mind trip of the movie. It's so effective in so many ways. It goes beyond the blob, or in the way that zombie movies, in a way, psychologically. And I think these psychological, suspenseful psychological stuff. That's the meat of. That's like where it gets beefier. That's like, it's less cheesy. It's more. If it's well done, it's just like it sticks with you. It's the heavy duty stuff. I'm scared by Dracula. I mean, if I saw a real life vampire, I'm sure I'd freak out. Sure, fangs and everything, but it depends on how, I guess, convincing the person looked at the vampire. Because usually, I think, on second thought, I mean, you'd say, oh, you see someone dressed up like a vampire and with the fangs. Oh, they're dressed up, so you wouldn't be afraid at all. But what if those incisors were razor sharp, and what if they came down below the chin, and what if that you saw that vampire move at an inhuman speed and stopped just short of you, and then took a big grin, and you could tell that those incisors were real teeth, and they came down below the chin, and that guy's eyes are turning red. And what would happen at that point? Yeah, you'd get freaked out, right? Exactly. It's a complex subject, Again, we keep feeling morally, maybe we should cut down on this stuff, right? But in this other respects, emotionally, intellectually, curiosity, all the curiosity stuff, the what ifs, the unknowns. Even if you're just doing something like Lovecraft, I don't really consider the Lovecraftian worlds to be all that frightening. In a way, yes. In another way, sure. It's kind of like you're exploring the unknown. So maybe, yeah, frightening. There's a lot of fear in not knowing something. Once you know something, it's much less frightening. And I honestly haven't explored the Lovecraftian world enough to maybe see some of those frightening images or most frightening creatures. And it's not just a question of creatures, it's also a question of natural laws and that sort of thing. If you're not sure how the universe functions, imagine a kid who hasn't even been to, well, even whether you're Christian or not, a kid who hasn't formed his worldview yet. A little kid, 5 years old, imagine what would happen to that kid. And this is why parents need to be so protective of kids. Imagine what would happen to a kid if, he saw somebody in a really, really frightening costume, and it was so frightening, the kid thought that this person wasn't human, and the person in that costume was acting in a manner that was extremely terrifying. That's why you don't do that stuff to a 5-year-old, right? It's just like this. It's the first time. It would traumatize the kid. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Going there. Yeah. I mean, maybe you're not gonna be able to find that kind of mask in even the scariest Halloween shops. Maybe it's some handmade thing. But it would scare the dickens out of it. 5 years old. Who does that? It would take a pretty mean person to do something like that. But on some level, even as adults, maybe we say, oh, we've experienced life enough. We have fewer, if any, phobias. There's always something in the back of your mind saying, but have we experienced everything? Do we know everything? Do we know? How far along are we? It's hard to gauge these things because we're talking about something in the emotional, spiritual, just the non-physical stuff. You're trying to gauge how experienced you are in life and how mature you are and how brave you are. Who are you comparing yourself against? God? Some other being that's far superior to you? Older? You can't see them? Jesus? The devil? I don't know. Like, whoever it is that you're comparing yourself to, maybe it's not fair because there's, I don't know, but it's just, I think, it's just, there's always a question of, well, what else? What else do I not know? How else do I need to grow? How can I grow? What can I, and I just, that's the other thing too, is for a lot of people with scary media, it's something where, and this, oh man, when you go to church, it doesn't matter. It can be my church, it could be another different Christian church, but I'm thinking of Christianity maybe more. But that's just because I'm more familiar with Christianity in my church. There are times when you just feel like you're surrounded by, oh, isn't it, or just everybody puts on a smile, everything's nice and good and upright and holy, and it's great. And there's a lot of things to learn. That's where you should be. That's the state of being that you ought to be in, as much as possible, right? But church, the environment at church, is often lacking, right? And where it's lacking it's the limitations of a physical building. You want to have church in your soul, so to speak, in a religious sense, wherever you go. However, there again, it's just this whole, well, what do you do at church? It's boring. It's boring, right? It's the same old scriptures, same old stories, right? On some level, it's going to be that way if you're older than mid-teens or something like that. You even get bored in your teen years. You can get bored when you're younger. Even if you're hearing things that you haven't heard before. The Bible's kind of boring. I don't know. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's not. So it's like, you get a lot of that. And you feel guilty for feeling that way. Like, why? I shouldn't, And I'm just suggesting this. Life is meant to be lived, There's so much to life that doesn't involve church. I don't think that you're supposed to live at church. I don't think you're supposed to, it's just that it's great to have that in your life because it is an anchor, spiritually, so to speak, emotionally. If things get too crazy or weird or whatever, that's something you can always fall back to. If you don't have something like that, for whatever reason, maybe consider something like that. I don't know, that's another subject, but it's like, there's all these things, it's like, there's all these things to learn. There's all these things to experience. To make sense of one's own emotions. And when you're always talking about Jesus, you're always talking about the good side, right? But what about the other side? It doesn't have to be necessarily straight up evil. It can just be the unknown. It can be animals. It can be scary animals. So that the primal, instinctual, things, and like fear of pain. There are certain fears that are not associated with morality or good and evil so much. There are more fears associated with, I don't want to get my arm bitten off by an alligator, and we all know alligators are obviously not evil, they're just dangerous, right? And this kind of stuff. And there's other kinds of phobias of different sorts, and all these phobias are very interesting. And oftentimes, you don't really talk about phobias at church. It's maybe not so appropriate, maybe. But so again, that's why we need some of little of this, little of that, little of that, little of this in life. We need that variety because we were meant to. That's how we're meant to live. But yeah, hopefully, good movies that are scary or good music or good you fill in the blank as far as the art or whatever we're talking about. Hopefully, it's not always just about the scary or the evil or dark. If it dwells for too long, maybe it's not so wholesome. But it's up to you guys. You're all free to do this. But it's good to have a variety within the music itself, so that you hear the contrasts. You don't have to always be in, gloomy, dreary, dismal, something dark and evil feeling. Land. You don't always have to be there. You can be in other places too. So it's kind of helps you be like, okay, But again, there's other questions we have. These people that occupy these very dark places, there's something wrong with them. Ultimately, God will know what's going on, and we can make our own judgments about people. But I think it's still important to be considerate. If we don't have a personal beef against someone, then it's just important to always try to be as considerate and as kind as possible, because there are sides to people that have some very dark and twisted minds that are also very good and pleasant and holy and awesome. And you say, oh, you can't have a dark soul and a good soul existing in the same soul. Look, we all have some good and some evil. It's just that we tend to choose one or the other more often, right? So it's just part of choosing the good is also trying to see the good in other people without being naive necessarily. Okay, I know I'm getting close to having to be done with this video. Hopefully this has been food for thought. Hopefully I haven't been trying to convince anybody of anything. There's a lot of things that I think are very healthy to mull over. So again, my overall thing I want to mention here is that it's morally probably a good idea to be careful how much of this stuff you're involved in. But in other respects, it's a good idea to, if you are interested in this sort of thing, intellectually, aesthetically, emotionally, whatever, outside of the morality, get involved with it. Just have some contrast so you don't get too dark. So, all right, you guys take care. I'll talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye.